Hello, anybody, somebody, nobody who may never see this. This is Siegfried Alexander Faust, the Wiftt. This time, I was talking to a friend last night, and I thought I'd do something funny, where I wanted to cover what I think, since Ninth Edition's release, are the top 10 most egregious OP nonsense things, or just were over the top. I have some uh, honorable mentions as well. So I'm going to start with the honorable mentions, things that are not in the top 10 list. And when I say top 10, it is not going to be in order. The Drukhari initial release is not on here, but yes, strong. Custodes, both pre-codex 9th edition and initial release without point changes and obsec changes, pretty strong. They're close to being on here, but I don't think they made the cut. They were very close. Tau unnerfed crisis suits and hammerhead point costs original release, very strong. And then two other things. The current rattling cost, because I don't remember if it was FAQ'd. I think it did get FAQ'd, but somebody made a typo and rattlings cost as much as crisis suits or something with the Munitorum field manual. It was very funny. I believe it was rattlings. And then Armor of Contempt, just the fact that you could get it on Brood Brother, Gene Stealer, Colt, Imperial Guard vehicles. You could get it on your servitors. You could get it on your Space Wolf doggies. Your wolves had Armor of Contempt. Why? I don't know. They could have just had a thing where it said excluding servitors and beast keywords. Your demon princes from Adeptus Chaos Astartes, they got Armor of Contempt. Your demon princes from demons did not. Some weird shenanigans. With that said, I want to talk about 10 cheesy things for 9th edition. And then most of them are gone or fixed. So, no particular order. We're going to talk about initial release Harlequins. Oh my god. So, most of this army? No. You bring 9 of these bad boys instead. Doo 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 doo. And then as many you can of troops inside the Star Weavers. And then back in the day, you would also try to fit a Shadow Seer and a Death Jester. Fuck the Troop Master. And because you could give the Death Jester the buff that he got back again for Favor of Kagarak. And make everyone 6 inches further away. And they, for their point value, just had absurd shooting and tankiness. -1 to hit, 4 up invul. Just so much nonsense. It was disgusting. Disgusting. And then everyone else is just in Star Weavers. So even if you kill a Star Weaver, they would be light. And so they can run out. And they had open top so they can advance over to you and shoot you with all their fusion pistols and stuff. And it's just... It was such a nonsense thing to deal with. It was so absurd. It wouldn't actually be 6. It'd be like 3 of these things. But, this was a force not to be fucked with. This was insane. And needed to be nerfed. God diggity damn. Harlequin initial release was stupid good. Things that are making this list are things that got changes or kept, things that kept armies in the top, 5 to 10 slot instantly, or kept them there, or was straight up boycott banned or immediately changed. The Silent King cheese, where you have the Silent King and a spooky Technomancer boy. He got core. You give them Veil of Shadows. You now teleport him across the map. This dude has a bunch of wounds. I'm gonna throw an arbitrary number, 1822 or some shit. And each of the men here is of 5 or 8. I think it's 5. Now let's say you get him down to 1 wound. Well, Living Metal is going to heal him 1. So that's 1 into 2. And then because you are his dynasty, which why wouldn't you be, you're going to go now into 3 wounds. And then this guy over here, the Technomancer, he can heal as well for core. And unless I'm mistaken, it's going to be a D3 with... Yep. The Silent King getting out of his bracket at 5 wounds. So, there's a 2/3 chance you're never going to be bottom bracket with Silent King. If you have 1 wound, you'll probably go back to middle bracket more often than not. Furthermore, you can revive something. You revive a menhir. That's 5 more wounds. You've healed for 10 wounds on average. 9 to 10. 9 the minimum. And because this is 5. And because of the rulings, even though the Silent King is wounded, almost dead, the damage must go to the menhir first. And so, round 1, you teleport, and then if you miss your 9-inch charge, you re-roll and try to charge in. You still are going to have shooting, and you just clog up your opponent and just be a menace. And best you can, you would just hide the Technomancer in a little bubble, like trying to prevent your opponent. They have to like go around you to charge to get to the Technomancer. Which, if they do that, then they're going to be in melee with the other stuff. And man, oh man, this was so stupid, so dumb. It was so silly that it just kept giving core to things that didn't matter, and they gave core to vehicles, but didn't limit it to characters. The Silent King cheese was just absurd. Was it OP? No, but it comboed with something else, which I'm going to talk to about now. Just speeding through these, which was, yes, secondaries. This one isn't very glamorous. It's not big shooty OP. Oh my god. But yes, secondaries. Dark Angel initial release secondaries, some Necron secondaries, and some other armies for the longest time didn't get their secondaries nerfed or changed and let them immediately go to the top spots or stay there for a while because they were so easy to get good points out of them. And if you built around those secondaries, it wasn't actually a bad way to play. It made the game more objective based, which is a bumpy road because it is Warhammer. I think it's a fair assessment. The game needs to be war based, combat, be it shooting, psychic, or melee, what have you. But without any objectives, and then I think it degrades. So while objectives are good, it got to the point where you're playing the objectives, not the game, kinda. I don't know. It shouldn't be too hard to combine brain cells to figure out my point. But it detracted from actual combat, making more of a capture the flag game. Which, it's not the worst thing, but it's like when multiple armies are doing that, it just became a problem. So, secondaries need to get fixed, and they eventually got fixed. Now this looks like two, because it is. These are two separate things. Pre-Codex Tyranid Hive Guard. And then pre-Codex Tyranid Hive Guard were obnoxious. They're kind of like Skyweavers, where Skyweavers are half as strong as what they used to be for Harlequins. Pre-Codex Hive Guard were obnoxious. You could probably look at, I believe, the 8th edition Hive Guard, if you're able to find that data sheet. It is so broken, and then with old 8th edition, I believe Kraken is the shooting faction. Don't quote me on that. And basically, you're going to get reroll hits of 1. You're going to give them, one of them, exploding 6s, reroll wounds, +1 to hit, and I don't remember if one else did mortals or not. I think on wounds of 6s, maybe there was another stratagem. I could be wrong. But the big thing is that their weapon was like 24 inches, and it doesn't need line of sight, and there was no penalty back then. So you could just move them if you wanted round 1. But if your opponent goes first, and they move anywhere past their deployment zone, which almost none of the missions start in your deployment zone, except for one. So they're going to have to move, and you just let loose a rain of fire. And then it wouldn't hurt to bring a couple exocrine boys as well. And then you just had Tyranid warriors or tanky chaff just absorb damage and just sit on the other objectives, and you would outscore your opponent, because if they move, they die. They can't hide. Cover doesn't work. You outrange them. It was complete bullshit. I played it. It was hilarious. I played most of the OP bullshit a limited amount of times. It was obnoxious. It needed to get fixed. I did lose with them a few times, but that was because my opponents would use enough go fast and get enough bad rolls. But statistically, the army was just insane. Hive Guard were just not fun. Your opponent couldn't interact with you. Big issue. Part 2 Tyranids. Wow, we're almost halfway done. Part 2 Tyranids was the initial release Tyranids. This includes the supplement and Crusher Stampede. Crusher Stampede was already strong. Crusher Stampede and supplement Tyranids before the immediate removal of that and Leviathan, because your army would just get trans. You could have a Dimicarion just run up and just launch something for 10 mortals or more. I think 12 mortals are on average or some nonsense, and he was just a beast to bring down. and he would just get almost double his point value, and he's already like a 250, 280 point model. Their zoanthropes were far cheaper. Tieran warriors were cheaper. And exocrines actually, in my opinion, got a buff. Because while the Hive Guard got nerfed to hell, the exocrines overall got a buff if you're not playing the range faction. They're actually like pretty good still. And so Tyranids initial release were just insane. More so the zoanthropes, which I'm no longer running because the zoanthropes were actually making them the top tier psychic army above Thousand Sons. Thousand Sons of Grey Knights? No, Tyranids. Great melee, amazing shooting, hard to bring down, and now the best psychic in the game. They were just absurd and needed to get stopped. Here's another one, which we go into, is Chaos Space Marines. Chaos Space Marines have a problem right now with these guys being good, so why not run them? But this this could be translated to be 2 Rubric Marines if you want squads. But basically, you would play, it was, and I admit, I wasn't my favorite. I had other legions of CSM that I think were more fun, but it was an issue. This is half, the first half, this is the second half, for Creations of Bile. There's actually 3 parts. The last one is me bitching. Creations of Bile, you don't need Bile, there's no reason to run them in it, so people don't. So it's fucking weird. It's like not running Abaddon and Black Legion. You don't have to, but like, and he has so many buffs for them. It's just weird. Bile doesn't have any buffs. It's just it's weird that he has no reason to be in his own army, and they don't need him, and he's like actually a bad pick. It's pretty stupid. You can make an argument for him, but I think there's more objective proof to not bring him. With that said, Master Possession, triple buffs the Chaos Terminators. Sorcerer buffs them as well. Abaddon will buff them as well. The Dark Apostles will buff them as well. These become insane. These become the most insane unit in the game when they receive all these buffs. Now, Abaddon has received a 50-point hike. Slaanesh has received for Marcus Slaanesh a 5-point hike, so that's 10 extra points. So that's 60 extra points, but you can still do this. Now, you could buff Abaddon instead for Black Legion, but the thing is with Creations of Bile, they have Fight on Death. So this is still a menace, but now it's a more expensive menace by 60 points for this whole combination. However, there's still this. Let me just get rid of this. There's still this 30 blob possessed. T5, 3 wounds, 5 attacks each, because that was the champion, for AP 2, damage 2, strength 5. Not bad, considering they have a guaranteed Fight on Death for melee. So they're just Space Wolf Wet Dream. And so you have their super buff thing in Terminators, and you just run this shit across the board, and your opponent cries. And then with your leftover points, because it was cheaper, you could bring a couple, you could bring 3, Chaos Spawn, probably. 2 to 3 Chaos Spawn to help you hold objectives. Or just get some extra Melta. It was just absurd. Some other stuff, again, like I said, Tau isn't on here, Custodes, Drukhari. They were very close to being on here between bumping this off and the secondaries. Boy, I feel like this is still an issue. And thankfully, it was just even worse for Creations Bile and need to get nerfed. Okay. Voton. Initial pre-release Voton. Yeah, this got banned. Just straight up like boycotted, and there was an apology video. You would have these 3, and then you would run like these 3, or you could even take out the scanner or searchlight. I forget which. Okay. You would target big shit, so you don't need the scanner, so you'd actually do this, yeah. So you'd have a bunch of these dudes. And then you'd have 3 of these squads as well. You have an Iron Hair champion, and then you could run Uthar or not, because everyone was crazy for this army before it became just Greater Thurian League to do the combo. And then You don't want 10-man blobs, you want 5-man blobs. Oh wait, no, you can't. Whatever. Take whatever you're forced to. Because it was a bit cheaper as well. And you would basically do funny business. You would get as many grudges out. You don't care if you lose a couple weak things. Because, yeah, you have like 3 of these things, and they're all in the Hecatown land fortresses. They're all just in there, so you can't even shoot these things off the table. They're tough as fuck. The Hecatown land fortress is T8, 16 wounds. I think there was talk about it even at one point being T9. I don't recall because it was so quickly nerfed. But you could then quite easily across your army, every round, get 1 to 2 of these things to trigger, getting their max Magna Rail weapons to go off, and just delete something. Doing 2d3 plus 6 plus 3 mortals, and you could do that twice. So you had 2 nigh guaranteed hammerheads, because you would do auto hit 6, auto wound 6, auto trigger, or not auto wound, but auto hit. But it would be on a 3-up, and you could do reroll and some other bonuses, and so it became a problem, to say the least. This army just straight up got basically boycotted in an apology video by Games Workshop. I don't think there's any other proof needed there. And then when they actually did make it into the tournament scene, they're in the top 10 slots, but for a melee faction. But yeah, this doesn't need much description. Current Imperial Guard and current Iron Hands. However, Iron Hands may not receive... I'd be a little surprised if Iron Hands receives a nerf, because that'd be targeted, because otherwise nerf would affect all Space Marines based on the doctrine system. Furthermore, the Imperial Guard are expecting to get some changes, because they originally, when they came out early release, they still technically had armor contempt on their vehicles, and they what else? They didn't have the indirect fire penalty still. So they were just super absurd, and they're getting toned down, and when more stuff comes out for them, they're going to get toned down further. That's what's being expected, but Iron Hands may not. But right now, both of these armies are ridiculous. Rough Riders trade for 3+ times their value on average, and Casterkin can get far more than 4 times their value on average for shooting, at least 3 times, so it is absurd. They have a lot of... For Born Soldiers. Born Soldiers is kind of what makes this problem even worse for shooting. But again, almost a third of the army is melee based, and it hits above its pay grade. Leontis is technically not out yet, and so I have some stuff here that is not currently playable. But if it doesn't get fixed, it's going to be broken as fuck. Yes. The one, the only, the Flamers. So, Zinj Flamers, big problema. Auto hitting. So, yes, you could bring them in 3 different armies, realistically. Now, one is obvious, that's Zinj Demons. Less obvious is Demons Undivided, which is where they shine more so. Because you could bring a Changeling, and while the Lord of Change, this is going to go into something else, is a big hitter, the Changeling will give them reroll 1s. They already auto-hit, and so all you really need was reroll 1s of wound. So you would get that wound reroll, and you have 1 exalted, 1 or more exalted Flamers, and so they get the extra strength. They're auto-hitting, strength 6, they kill anything in Overwatch, Flamers. Absurd, disgusting, and in my opinion, Bellicor is-ish the 3rd strongest model in the game. So the 3 strongest models were Flamers, Abaddon, and Bellicor. And so even Bellicor has received some nerfs. And so that was just an insane army. In my opinion, one of the strongest armies in the game, actually, at that point. And it was just not being talked about because, I don't know why. They was just insane. I know it was growing in the competitive scene. It seemed, maybe because I'm biased, that it started earlier in tabletop, because I saw information for that prior than in the IRL scene. But yeah, Demons with Flamers Undivided. And the last one was actually Thousand Sons. Thousand Sons had 2 ways to play this. You could A, bring the Changeling and 3 of these Flamer boys, and that was pretty strong. Pretty strong, pretty nasty. Conversely, you could just bring a Lord of Change and Horrors or something. Now, the Lord of Change can bibbidi bop, and because you're Thousand Sons, you could double cast his spooky Infernal Gateway ability. And so you had a lot of nasty options there. But with the Flamers getting nerfed, you'd still just be doing this. But because of Ark of Omen, it's a bit of debate if you want to do the Lord of Change still in a Thousand Suns detachment. It's still very good, but I think because of loss of AOC, there's some more additional options opening up. And I believe that might be everything. Yeah, that's it. So that was the top 10, I think, things that were really cheesy or ridiculous for Warhammer. The Silent King cheese for 9th edition. Initial release Tyranids to include the Crusher Stampede, and it was taking the tournament scene as well years back. Initial release Harlequins. Initial pre-release Voton. The Tyranid Hiveguard pre-codex release. The Dark Angel Necron additional faction secondaries that were overtuned because they would just easily outscore your opponent, or you could play more passively and in a warlike game and not really fight and probably outscore your opponent. New Iron Hands, new Imperial Guard, Tzeentch Flamers initial release, more so for Chaos Demons Undivided because the Lord of Change, Bloodthirster are very spooky, along with Be'lakor, far spookier than Tzeentch Army. And the Creations of Bile with Abaddon and Terminator cheese. So Abaddon, insane, strong, great, provides good buffs, good overall. And he's now 50 points more expensive, so he was 50 points cheaper. And then you had your Terminator block, and it just that can just get insane with a 5-up Feel No Pain, trans on like the hit and wound roll or some shit, +1 to hit, 4-up invul, god damn, I forget if I said 5-up Feel No Pain, a resurrecting model every round, +1 strength or toughness. The thing is, I know there's more. It's just so disgusting. And then you had just a bunch of fight on death, possessed running at your opponent. And then, yeah, the Harlequin initial release, just, that was one of the more absurd things. The Silent King cheese was actually a bit overrated, but it was just, I think, that's maybe a bias for me versus including the Custodes on here. I feel like he deserves it because it just made no fucking sense. You could do some weird shit with that. If it wasn't for that, then I would put the Custodes in the top 10. Yes, the Tau unnerfed Crisis Suits and Hammerhead point values was pretty good. And that would also be up in the air. I'd have to debate that. But I think if there was no AOC, Custodes would beat the Tau. With AOC, then Tau, because you need the heavier punching. With that said, I hope you like this content. This video already went longer than I thought, but I thought I'd just get some ranting out there, some funny talking about some ridiculous nonsense. Again, if you want to read up on some salt, you could look up initial release, all the argumentation for Voton, how OP they were, and the boycotting. Hiveguard, you could go check out their 8th edition. I believe it'd be the 8th edition stat line, and then the Kraken, I believe, shooting, which would give them like double shooting and all the stratagems and shit. How broken that was, because your opponent can't do anything, or you can't really do anything against that. The initial release, point values. I dare you to build a list of initial point values and abilities for Harlequin and bring that into a 2K game and just see how much your points are fucking over the required amount. I guarantee if you bring Void Weavers, which was the thing, easily 400 to 500 points over. Like, you're bringing an army and a quarter compared to your opponent. That shit was insane how much they've been nerfed because of their value. And again, there's 4-up invul. With that said, if you like my content, please like, share, and subscribe. Spread the word. I'm trying to put out some more videos. I actually heard back. I got a job. But I won't start till next month. And so I'm still, like, freaking out for money and trying to do what I can to get by. I hope to still try to be involved in the community and put out content. With that said, take care, everyone. Game on, gamers. Bye.